Stop everything and internalize this immediate, devastating truth. You are your own worst enemy in the critical moments of confrontation and ambition. Why? Because the single most common phrase used to derail success is not spoken by an adversary. It is spoken by you, the unnecessary explanation. Think about the last time you felt compelled to spend 5 minutes justifying a simple decision, a boundary, or a path you chose. In that frantic verbal cascade, you believed you were seeking understanding. In reality, you were surrendering control and strategically advertising your profound weakness. The urge to explain yourself is a deep-seated psychological reflex, the inner apology, born from a paralyzing fear of conflict and a desperate need for external validation. This reflex is a fatal flaw in power dynamics. Every minute you spend justifying your choices to someone who will not live with the consequences is a minute you are teaching them that your position is negotiable, fragile, and subject to their approval. Your words, intended as a defense, become evidence of your insecurity. Every detail you offer is a piece of intelligence an adversary can use to outmaneuver you or simply discount your value. The ancient masters of power recognized this vulnerability with chilling clarity. They knew that when you rush to defend, you are already admitting guilt or, at minimum, acknowledging the legitimacy of the attack. Niccolo Machiavelli provided the unyielding verdict. He who excuses himself accuses himself. By engaging in the act of justification, you validate the premise that you were wrong, and you grant the adversary the authority to judge your actions. The person who is truly sovereign, who has achieved mental stillness and certainty, requires no such external defense. The powerful do not explain their authority, they simply assert it. They understand that the single most effective counterstrike against a challenge is not a torrent of defensive rhetoric, but unyielding, strategic silence followed by decisive action. This video is the blueprint for eliminating this costly verbal leakage. We will show you how to transform the moment you are challenged from a crisis of self-doubt into an unbreakable display of self-sovereignty and control. Your future success depends entirely on your willingness to trade the comfort of explanation for the cold, hard certainty of victory. Now, drop this affirmation in the comments and commit to the discipline. I speak only to win. My actions are my defense. Number 1. The verbal leak. The first non-negotiable law in executing the strategy of winning through silence is to surgically eliminate the verbal leak. This is the disastrous habit of allowing apologetic language and defensive rhetoric to hemorrhage your power and compromise your conviction. Every single time you use verbal qualifiers, phrases like just, maybe, or the unnecessary prefix, I think, you are not being polite. You are strategically broadcasting your low self-worth and fear of conflict. This immediately signals to your environment that your stance is negotiable, easily dismissed, and fundamentally contingent upon their immediate approval. Machiavelli defined the immutable strategic reality you must adhere to. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This is your mandate. Since the vast majority of people will judge you exclusively on your external presentation, you must ensure that your projected image is one of unquestionable strength and competence. Apologetic language is a visual and auditory cue that tells everyone, "Please, someone judge me," which only invites them to aggressively push back and discount your value. The anatomy of low conviction. You must dissect and purge the specific vocabulary of low conviction. The apology reflex. Phrases like, "I'm sorry to interrupt," or "I'm sorry I'm asking," this are lethal. You are apologizing for your existence or for a legitimate, necessary demand. Replace the apology with appreciation. Instead of "sorry to bother you," but use "thank you for making time for this." The minimizing qualifier. Words like just, only, or a little bit. Shrink your contribution. Never say, I just have a quick idea. Say, here is my analysis. Your ideas are high-value statements, not tentative suggestions. The deferential preface. Phrases such as, I think we should, signal a lack of finality and invite debate. Replace doubt with declarative command. Instead of, I think we should launch next week, state, we are launching next week, or the decision is to launch next week. The core of the verbal leak is the instinct to defend your actions or decisions. When someone challenges a boundary you set or questions a decision you executed, the weak response is to launch into a frantic, lengthy explanation of your rationale. This defensive act achieves two catastrophic strategic failures. First, you validate the challenger's authority to judge you. Second, you give them the verbal ammunition necessary to dismantle your position point by point. The strategic alternative is declarative finality. A sovereign decision once made requires no justification. Your results are your only defense. When challenged, a concise, non-emotional statement suffices. That is the course of action we are pursuing, or that is my decision on the matter. You must force the adversary to deal with the factual reality of your choice, not the emotional fantasy of your rationale. When a colleague tries to pressure you into a meeting you don't have time for, the way you respond makes all the difference. Consider the common trap, the apologetic leak. If you reply, I'm really sorry, but I just don't think I can make it because my schedule is absolutely crazy this afternoon, maybe another time. Your colleague hears the apology and the maybe, sensing an opportunity to push. They'll immediately counter with something like, it's only 20 minutes, surely you can squeeze it in. Contrast that with the strategic purge. You reply calmly, I appreciate the invite. My schedule is fully committed. I am available next Tuesday. The tone is polite but absolutely firm. You have not explained or apologized. You have simply stated a fact and immediately provided an alternative on your terms. The result is that you retain control and establish your time as a finite, non-negotiable resource. By eliminating the verbal leak, you transform your communication from a source of vulnerability into an unbreakable defense. You secure the perception of competence, and as Machiavelli taught, that visible strength quickly becomes the only reality that matters. Number 2, the strategic pause. The second law in achieving victory through restraint is the absolute mastery of the strategic pause. This is the deliberate, potent use of stillness and silence to deny your adversary the reaction they crave, thereby forcing them to expose their own hand and strategic weaknesses. When challenged, the weak man reacts immediately, surrendering his control and revealing his emotional map. The strategist, however, executes the pause, recognizing that silence is an active psychological weapon. Machiavelli defined the essence of efficient action. The wise man does at once what the fool does finally. The fool, in a moment of conflict, eventually attempts to act rationally, but only after wasting time and credibility on an emotional outburst. The wise man, by executing the pause immediately, prevents the emotional damage, preserves his composure, and seizes the high ground of control before the adversary even realizes the test has begun. The power of the strategic pause lies in creating a psychological vacuum. Human nature inherently abhors silence in moments of high tension. Your adversary, accustomed to immediate feedback, interprets your stillness as either profound strength or a terrifying unknown. They panic, and in their haste to fill the void, they will reveal critical information, offer unnecessary concessions, or foolishly escalate their attack in a predictable manner. This pause is a direct, aggressive counterstrike against the adversary's timeline. When you delay your response, you are effectively forcing them to endure their own rising anxiety. This pressure compels them to negotiate against themselves, often revealing their true walkaway point or their hidden motivations simply to escape the tension. The strategist uses the opponent's own internal discomfort as a tool of extraction. To execute this, the pause must be deliberate, not accidental. You must master the physical and mental components simultaneously. Physical stillness. Immediately forbid all movement. Maintain steady eye contact and an unslumped, commanding posture. Control your breath to prevent physiological panic from leaking into your posture. Fidgeting signals fear. Stillness signals sovereignty. Internal analysis. Use the silence to ask 3 questions. What is the actual goal of this attack? What is my adversary's hidden fear? What is the single most damaging thing I can say or do next that serves my long-term goal? Measure delivery. When you finally speak, your words must be sparse, precise, and declarative. The weight of your response is magnified by the period of silence that preceded it. Consider 2 high-stakes scenarios where the pause dictates the outcome. Negotiation leverage. An adversary makes a low-ball offer and then waits for your reply. The fool immediately counters. You, the strategist, maintain absolute silence for a count of 5. You watch them. The adversary, unable to bear the tension, will inevitably break the quiet first, often saying something like, "We could potentially find another 5%, if that helps, or that figure is negotiable, of course." You gain a concession without uttering a word. Argument control. A coworker launches an aggressive, emotional attack against your project. The fool matches their energy. You execute the pause. You meet their shouting with stillness and an unreadable gaze. The attacker's fury is starved of the reciprocal energy it needs to thrive. They feel foolish and exposed, and the attack quickly dissipates, allowing you to regain control of the discussion and reframe it to your advantage. By mastering the strategic pause, you eliminate predictability, preserve your emotional reserves, and transform tension into absolute, measurable leverage. Your silence becomes the definitive sign of a mind that is thinking, calculating, and preparing for the final winning move. Number 3. Frame control. The third law in mastering the one power move that compels submission is the absolute discipline of frame control. This is the ultimate strategic art. You must cease merely joining the adversary's debate and assume the role of the individual who decides what the debate is fundamentally about. The majority enter every interaction reacting to the adversary's agenda. They answer the questions, respond to the terms, and operate within the predetermined, restricted limits set by the other side. This passive acceptance is a form of weak thinking that guarantees immediate subservience. The moment you accept the framework presented by your adversary, you are structurally compromised. If they frame the discussion around your mistakes, you are instantly forced onto the defensive. If they frame the discussion around their low budget, you are instantly compelled to lower your price. This psychological acceptance guarantees your subservience. You must internalize that every interaction is a quiet war to establish the governing narrative, and whoever controls the narrative controls the outcome. Machiavelli defined the most stable form of structural power in terms of indispensability, and this concept anchors frame control. The best fortress is to be found in the love of the people applied to this law. Your goal is to make your vision and your strategic framing indispensable to the successful outcome. You achieve this by building a fortress of ideas that everyone else must enter to achieve their own goals. You force people to operate within your frame because it becomes the most logical, most competent, and only reliable path forward. To enforce your will, you must aggressively counter the adversary's premise using a specific sequence, preventing them from defining your reality. Refuse the premise. Do not debate the flawed premise. If a client states, "Your idea is too expensive," The weak person defends their costs. You, the master, refuse the premise by stating, the cost is secondary to the long-term utility. Let's re-examine the projected return on investment, which is the actual frame. You instantly deny the budget concern priority and elevate the discussion to value and ROI. Redirect the focus. Immediately shift the conversation away from your weakness or mistake and toward a favorable objective that only you can lead. If they complain about your past actions, you instantly redirect to the future. That is a past issue we have resolved. The current agenda demands we focus on X, which is already behind schedule. You change the subject from blame to execution. Reframe the outcome. Ensure the discussion centers not on what you hope to gain, but on what they stand to lose by failing to align with your frame. This exploits the fundamental psychological rule that the fear of loss is exponentially more motivating than the desire for gain. Consider two critical, relatable scenarios where frame control is the decisive factor. The complaint redirection. A subordinate approaches you with a lengthy emotional complaint about your recent decision, aiming to pressure you into reversing it. Instead of explaining your rationale, you immediately seize control. I see the frustration this has caused. However, my focus is now on solving the next 3 critical steps. What is the most productive action we can take in the next hour to mitigate this impact? The result: you change the frame from your mistake to their immediate responsibility to execute your solution. You have successfully placed yourself in the leadership position. The urgency shift. A client pressures you with false urgency. I need this discount approved by the end of the day or we walk. The strategic response is to refuse their time constraint frame and elevate the discussion to value and quality. I understand the urgency, given the quality and complexity of the solution we are delivering. I require adequate time to ensure its integrity. I will provide a definitive response tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. The result: you resist their frantic pace, regain time for strategic assessment, and force the client to accept that your internal standards dictate the pace, not their external pressure. By consistently controlling the frame, you eliminate emotional reaction and replace it with strategic dictation. You stop working within their constraints and force your entire environment to accept and play by your rules. Number 4. The logic trap. You must immediately dismantle the most persistent self-deception that plagues competence. The belief that your meticulous rationale matters more than your eventual outcome. This is the logic trap. Results are the only immutable truth. Your good intentions, your detailed explanations, and your logical justifications are utterly irrelevant if the final result is failure or stagnation. The world does not reward those who explain why they failed. It rewards those who execute and succeed, regardless of how unconventional or non-obvious their method may be. Machiavelli gave us the ultimate, cold measure of human motivation that dictates this law. Men sooner forget the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony. This statement is profoundly strategic. It teaches that deep emotional attachments are quickly superseded by the immediate, tangible reality of material loss or gain. Applied to your actions, this means the pain of your failure to deliver a result will always be felt more keenly by your environment than the purity of your motive or the elegance of your process. You must forbid yourself from valuing the explanation of your process over the tangible security of your success. The logic trap ensnares you by encouraging you to validate your process rather than securing the victory. When you fail, your instinct is to seek comfort by offering a detailed explanation of why. We had bad luck, the market shifted, the team didn't cooperate. This explanation is a psychological shield that merely masks a failed strategy. Your elegant rationale gives you comfort, but it gives your adversary leverage, and it costs you the opportunity to correct the structural error. The world is saturated with people who possess excellent excuses for their mediocrity. It demands individuals who possess unchallengeable results for their competence. Consider a scenario in the strategic execution of a business goal where a non-conventional move is required. The logical fail. A strategist refuses to launch a product until every minor detail is perfect, adhering rigidly to a conventional 12-month development timeline, because that's the logical way. Result: a nimble competitor launches an imperfect version 6 months earlier, captures the market, and renders the perfect product obsolete upon arrival. The logical strategist has an excellent explanation for his failure, but zero patrimony. The strategic win. The strategist identifies the market opportunity and launches a minimum viable product immediately, prioritizing market entry and revenue over conventional perfection. The product is messy, but it is real. He then iterates and improves based on real-world data, ultimately dominating the market. He chose effectiveness over elegance. To master this law, you must stop validating your effort and start securing your objective. The necessary action often defies the conventional, comforting explanation. Success is achieved by those who are willing to break accepted norms and challenge orthodox methods in relentless pursuit of the result. Your goal is to be the person with the unconventional success story, not the person with the perfectly logical, predictable failure narrative. Your strategic mantra must be, results are the only proof required. When your outcomes are undeniable, the elegance of your rationale is irrelevant. Conversely, when your results are lacking, no amount of verbal justification can save your position. Stop validating your process. Start securing your outcome. The lasting memory you leave, your patrimony, is all that truly endures. Number 5. The Irrelevance Protocol. The fifth law in achieving victory through restraint is the absolute discipline of the Irrelevance Protocol. This is the strategic system for non-emotionally filtering and discarding the constant flood of low-value opinions, petty complaints, and irrelevant criticism that threatens to sabotage your ascent. Most men, whether through insecurity or misplaced politeness, accept and process every piece of feedback directed at them. This unfiltered input is a strategic drain. It consumes focus, wastes energy, and grants undue authority to individuals who are utterly unqualified to judge your trajectory. Your strategic mandate is to build an iron filter. You must internalize that not all opinions hold equal weight. In fact, the vast majority are simply noise that must be ruthlessly discarded to preserve your mental clarity. Engaging in a futile debate with a fool elevates the fool to your level, and it guarantees you waste finite time that should be dedicated to execution. Machiavelli defined the necessary strategic trade-off that justifies this dismissal. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Applied to feedback, love is the desire to please everyone by addressing every complaint, which makes you vulnerable and predictable. Fear is the respect for your unyielding standards and boundaries, achieved by surgically dismissing input that fails to meet your criteria. By ignoring the irrelevant, you project an image of absolute conviction and focus, forcing people to respect your time rather than demand it. To execute the Irrelevance Protocol, you must subject every piece of criticism to 3 objective, cold filters. Any feedback that fails these tests must be immediately discarded and neutralized. The source filter. Who is delivering this critique? Is this person operating at a higher level than you in the specific area they are criticizing? Do they have a proven track record of achieving the results you are seeking? If the source is a spectator, a failure, or a chronic complainer, the feedback is noise, regardless of how aggressively it is delivered. The intent. Filter. What is the underlying motive? Is the criticism genuinely constructive, or is it driven by envy, resentment, or a desire to stall your momentum? Feedback driven by personal agenda or malicious jealousy must be weaponized as fuel, not engaged as truth. The actionability filter. Is the critique precise and actionable? Does it suggest a clear, measurable step you can take to improve your position? If the feedback is vague, emotional, or simply states, "I don't like it," it lacks utility and must be discarded. Once a critique has been categorized as irrelevant, your response must be surgical and non-emotional. Do not defend. Defending confirms the critic's right to judge you. Instead, you must execute the weaponized dismissal. Use short, definitive statements that close the door to further debate. Examples include, "Thank you for the data, I will file it appropriately," or "noted," or simply, "That's not the direction we're optimizing for right now." You deny the critic the emotional satisfaction of drawing you into a fight. Your posture and tone must align with your dismissal. Maintain unwavering eye contact, use a low, calm voice, and immediately pivot your physical attention to a high-value task. This signals that the critic is no longer worthy of your time or focus. Your refusal to engage with the irrelevant conserves your mental energy, preserves your critical focus for execution, and, most powerfully, enhances your reputation for decisiveness. People see that you cannot be easily distracted, and they learn to respect your high standard for engagement. You are not just ignoring noise. You are demonstrating that your time is too valuable to waste on low-leverage conflicts. Number 6. The one-sentence rule. The sixth law in achieving victory through verbal restraint is the absolute mastery of the one-sentence rule. This discipline demands that you eliminate all verbal preamble, banish self-defeating justification, and perfect the art of delivering concise, declarative commands that signal unshakable finality, not open negotiation. The weak use 1,000 words to plead for something they might have secured in 10. The strategist understands that verbosity is a psychological weakness that signals an internal conflict between desire and conviction. Lengthy explanations destroy your leverage and actively reveal your internal conflict. When you use 5 sentences to justify a simple no, you are not being transparent. You are handing your adversary 4 unnecessary points of argument to use against you. This verbal leakage signals to your environment that your decision is still fragile, still open to debate, and still subject to influence. Your goal is to deliver commands with the finality of a verdict, leaving no time or space for resistance to form. Machiavelli defined the efficiency required when delivering difficult news or enforcing necessary consequences. Severities should be dealt out all at once so that their suddenness may give less offense. Applied to your communication, this quote is a mandate for surgical brevity. A quick, clean, one-sentence statement of your command, whether a boundary, a decision, or a demand, is less open to psychological offense and protracted argument than a slow, drawn-out justification. The short statement minimizes the time the adversary has to mount an emotional counterattack, forcing them to deal with the factual reality of the decision immediately. To achieve the economy of command, you must ruthlessly purge the language of weakness from your vocabulary. Ban phrases like, "I think," "maybe we should," or "I was just wondering." These hedge your command and transform certainty into suggestion. Never begin a command with "I'm sorry," or end a boundary with "because." The need to justify suggests you believe your choice is wrong. Replace all soft language with absolute factual statements. Your voice must convey that the matter is settled. The economy of command conserves your energy, preserves your authority, and forces rapid acceptance from your environment. Brevity signals that your decision-making process is internal, thorough, and not subject to external influence or debate. By eliminating the preamble and the apology, you force the listener to accept the factual reality of your command, rather than wasting time trying to dissect your emotions. This finality is not cruelty, it is the most efficient use of your power and the ultimate expression of self-mastery. The structural journey is now complete. You have systematically acquired the definitive blueprint for winning through restraint, eliminating the catastrophic psychological reflex to apologize for your own existence. You have successfully dismantled the debilitating notion that justification is necessary, and you have replaced it with the structural strength of unapologetic action. Let the totality of this strategic knowledge now fuse into your unshakable reality. The process began by establishing Law 1, the verbal leak, demanding that you surgically eliminate the language of low conviction, the justs and sorries that advertise your weakness. This vital foundation prepared you for Law 2, the strategic pause, where you learned to wield absolute stillness as a counterstrike, denying emotional reaction and forcing the adversary to expose their hand. You reinforced this structure by mastering Law 3, frame control, refusing the adversary's premise and seizing the authority to define the terms of every interaction. Your entire worldview was then sharpened by Law 4, the logic trap, internalizing that your execution, your results, is the only proof that matters, rendering lengthy rationale irrelevant. You fortified your defenses with Law 5, the irrelevance protocol, learning how to coldly discard low-value opinion and filter out noise. Finally, you perfected your command with Law 6, the one-sentence rule, mastering the economy of language that signals finality, not negotiation. You have successfully constructed the unapologetic assent, the structural and psychological position where you are entirely impervious to external pressure because you have ceased engaging in the vulnerability of self-defense. Machiavelli defined the immutable strategic flaw in this pursuit. He who excuses himself accuses himself. You now understand that the very act of explaining a correct decision is to validate the premise that you could have been wrong, granting your adversary the authority to sit in judgment. You no longer operate under that false authority. You have both the tactical blueprint and the iron will to refuse that psychological surrender. The challenge is immediate and non-negotiable. Your environment will test your new boundaries instantly. Adversaries will demand concessions and attempt to provoke your weakness. Your old weak programming will attempt to seduce you back into the comfort of unnecessary explanation. You must silence that inner voice and choose the strategic action. The man who has truly mastered this discipline requires no applause. He does not apologize for the space he occupies. He simply asserts his will and lets the effectiveness of his outcome serve as his only defense. You are no longer the participant who waits for approval. You are the architect who commands the terms of engagement. Your final, non-negotiable step is to commit to this self-sovereignty without flinching. Your unshakable presence and your refusal to justify your success is precisely what compels them to respect your terms and accept your victory instantly. Every time you deliver a declarative statement without the self-sabotaging, "I think," or "I'm sorry," you are laying another brick in your foundation of power. Make your commitment binding. Drop this final, irreversible affirmation into the comments. My dominion is absolute. I am unchallengeable. The time for explaining yourself is over. The time for winning has begun.